Greetings to all our learners. Welcome to CEC lecture. Dear learners, the topic that we shall analyze is Gandhian Views and Global World. This is indeed a very significant topic because when we look at that how important are the ideals, the vision of Mahatma Gandhi ji for looking at aspects of global world, for issues involving global governance. In this lecture, we shall have analysis of how truth, non-violence are important today. We shall look into whether the structure, the working of world order, whether is it appropriate or not, and how today Gandhian perspectives find an echo at the highest level of world issues. And most important, that when we look at power, can we just have understanding of power from only one aspect? Dear learners, when we try to understand Gandhian views, we all know that Gandhian views are a combination of tradition, modernity, simple as well as complex. They embody the best of East and West. Gandhi studied from all and various kinds of sources, but the novelty is that he attempted to situate them, to root them in Indian ethos, culture, harnessing universal principles. The Gandhian philosophy exists on many aspects, connotations of spirituality, morality, political aspects, economic structures, social issues, individual perspective, collective ambit, all of it. If one wants to study that, one can find a stream within the dynamic and multifaceted, the myriad Gandhian philosophy. Most important here is that there is one common connecting cord, that is to transform the individual and society using the pillars of truth and non-violence. Mahatma Gandhi ji studied scriptures of various faiths, and this was because in search for self-realization. Most important what one finds here is that dogma had no place in any of Gandhian writings, in his views, in his speeches at various occasions. Mahatma Gandhi ji developed the ideas from various inspirational sources. He studied the Bhagavad Gita, Jainism, Buddhism, Bible, Gopal Krishna Gokhale, Tolstoy, John Ruskin. So what we find here is that when we are trying to understand Mahatma Gandhi ji with respect to global world, one has to look into this combination of tradition with modernity, studying the best of East and the West and multiple sources, but situating them in the Indian context. When we have a look at the global world, human society, one gets a perspective that it is fast changing. There are new issues coming up, new aspects coming up, but with that, for example, when we see rapid developments in technology, communication, industries, scientific knowledge, however, the struggle with innumerable problems at social, economic, cultural and political levels exist. The global efforts in order to achieve Millennium Development Goals at several parlance, at several occasions in global governance today are having an important point of reference, and that is Mahatma Gandhi ji. My life is my message, said Mahatma Gandhi ji. This is not just a mere statement by the Mahatma, but it signifies that how theory and action were complementary and supplementary to each other for Mahatma Gandhi ji. Theory and action went hand in hand. When we try to understand the ambit of peace, which is very important for global governance and global issues, one finds that, let's take a reference to the Hind Swaraj, written in 1909, which criticized, when we look at it from the first reading, that is how it criticized the modern Western model of development as somehow violent. So therefore what we see here is that the readings of violence had deeper connotations. It was committed to the cause of peace and non-violence, which were integral to his philosophy of life as well as the world view. Dear learners, when we try to understand the Gandhian perspective on non-violence, at the very outset, it acknowledges that there is inherent goodness, inherent capacity of reform of human beings. Further, why one should take recourse to non-violence? Because there is capacity of all human beings to develop their full potential. The path of violence was akin to that of a brute force, whereas that of non-violence was linked to humanness, humanity. When we look at the issues of war in global order, with colossal damage to civilians, people, property, innocent lives, this aspect, the idealistic perspective of Mahatma Gandhiji, that is, non-violence was much more lethal a force to practice because it requires self-realization, self-restraint, discipline, and thereby one has to revisit the Gandhian principle for this global order issue of war and related conflict. When we see today that globalization has led to integration and interchange, things are in a parlance of what has been defined by theorists as space-time compression. But even before globalization, the Mahatma had updated us, taught us the message of unity and oneness of all. He stressed on the interdependence and interrelated nature of living beings. And most important, when we are trying to look at this interdependent and interrelated nature, one has to see that how processes of global governance do not exist in a vacuum. While policy analysis, today it is imperative to have an impact analysis of how it will impact the other. Power is a central concept in global governance. Power is of two kinds. Quoting from the words of Mahatma Gandhiji, one is obtained by fear of punishment and other by acts of love. Power based on love is 1,000 times more effective and permanent than the one derived from fear of punishment. So what we see here is that in this domain of power, Mahatma Gandhiji's message, that is power based on love, is presenting a vision before nations, if we are to analyze here it for contemporary world order, to situate the foundations of diplomacy on aspects of mutual respect, tolerance, which are the contours of love, in order to have a much more sustained standing for each other in terms of bilateral and multilateral negotiations. Practice and action went hand in hand. As Mahatma Gandhiji's own words opined, that there are many causes that I am prepared to die for, but no cause that I am prepared to kill for. That shows us that how there was the desire to stand for peace in all times. That how today all nations must also reread this aspect of Mahatma Gandhiji to develop the strength of courage, and most important, how self-sacrifice can be benefit for everyone. Most important that Mahatma Gandhiji's perspective, in his views, tried to give us analysis of ideas for human conflicts and how these conflicts are related to the bigger global order. His own words, an eye for an eye will only make the whole world blind. This tells us that how ego, stubbornness, competitive side, conflictual aspects of the human issues and conflicts need to be done away with. Today, when we look at disputes that are being there for a long time, this perspective of Mahatma Gandhiji has a very important bearing for global issues, that how resolution of disputes, there must be a common standpoint of willingness acceptance on part of nation states to understand issues of the other. When we look at how today Mahatma Gandhiji's perspective, his ideals are very relevant today. They are echoing all over the world. And an example here, that is how there has been a campaign that the Embassy of India, Netherlands at The Hague and the Gandhi Nonviolence Foundation, that is Follow the Mahatma campaign, looking at how important his message of peace and truth and non-violence was. This campaign is to disseminate Mahatma Gandhiji's message of non-violence to school children. And how, when we go by the history of working of United Nations, in the year 2007, the United Nations declared Mahatma Gandhiji's birthday, 2nd October, as International Day of Non-Violence and called upon countries and people across the world to spread his message of non-violence. This is a very important report that we quote from the recent report, that is Follow the Mahatma campaign, planned in Netherlands to mark Mahatma Gandhi Jayanti. In 2001, again going by accounts of history from UN, the United Nations General Assembly voted to call for non-violence and ceasefire on World Peace Day, and for the message of it had already been given by the Mahatma. That is, there is no path to peace. Peace is the path. Then again, if we go by accounts of history, General Assembly resolution in June 2007 established the commemoration of the International Day as an occasion to disseminate the message of non-violence, including through education, public awareness, amongst others. The resolution, if we read from that, reaffirms that there is universal relevance of the principle of non-violence and the desire to secure a culture of peace, tolerance, understanding. Non-violence for Mahatma Gandhiji was the greatest force, if we quote from his words, greatest force at the disposal of mankind. It is mightier than the mightiest weapon of the destruction devised by the ingenuity of man. So what we find here is that in his life, Mahatma Gandhiji remained committed to the belief of non-violence, even under oppressive conditions and in the face of huge challenges. So today, when we look at world order, Mahatma Gandhiji's vision, his philosophy can be read to be the pillars of the work of United Nations. As we look at how United Nations, which was a post-Second World War organization, how it came up in the backdrop of after the Second World War, that is how non-violent movements have changed history. And Mahatma Gandhiji's philosophy is also akin to what United Nations upholds for. Now, most important, why we say the ideals of Mahatma Gandhiji and United Nations are complementary to each other. Looking at interconnected nature of things, opposing colonialism and imperialism, analyzing unity between all things, that is vision which was just not about politics, but it went far beyond politics. Today, when UN talks about human rights, sustainability, Mahatma Gandhiji had spoken about it, lived about it in his life only. Non-violence for him was just not a philosophy, but a political strategy to achieve the twin aim of justice and change. Dear learners, as we see that today when we are looking at issues of sanitation, clean drinking water, hygienic facilities, which were earlier, when a person could not even talk about it because they were looked as taboo. But today, Gandhian values, the significant message of them is being talked, included in policies by every nation. And Gandhian values today truly transcend all borders. Let me quote from an important quote from the UN Secretary General, Mahatma Gandhi in the contemporary world, from his statement on 25th September 2019. Gandhi's enduring legacy is his continued relevance to our thinking and action on a broad sweep of issues, from protecting the environment to promoting justice, from education to inequality. His teaching remained fresh and thought-provoking, including his emphasis on the importance of facing up to truth with courage. Dear learners, we are quoting from the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres' remarks at the Leadership Matters Relevance of Mahatma Gandhi in the Contemporary World in New York on 24th September. So therefore, how the perspective that we took from this speech, that how vision of Mahatma Gandhi and United Nations were same. The idea of security, dear learners, we all know that it is transcending the traditional concern. When non-traditional security threats, that is global pandemics, transnational crimes, climate change, natural disasters, these are transnational in nature and they required unified effort, collective action. Non-violent society, what Mahatma Gandhi ji dreamt of, is committed to Sarvodaya, growth, upliftment of all, empowerment of the person in the last line. As Mahatma Gandhi ji's talisman says, greatest advantage of the least disadvantage. So therefore, today when we are looking at human security, which is looking at the aspect of security at individual, food, climate, economy, community, amongst others, today the report on human security, which comes into existence in 1994, Mahatma Gandhi ji has given us a way to attain human security way long back in his life. Health and development goals, today what we are seeing is that they are becoming very important both for domestic as well as for international security policies. There are issues of climate, food, sanitary, living conditions, ethical aspects which are affecting billions of people all over the world. An example here, how the Swachh Bharat mission, which was launched on 2nd October 2014 to build clean and open defecation-free nation by 2nd October 2019. It's a tribute to the 150th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi ji. An important remarks that we quote from Dr. Yasmin Ali Haq, UNICEF India representative in 2018, that today's safe water, effective sanitation, hygiene are significant, important for every child, every community. There is a need for stronger, healthier, more equitable societies. And thereby, we quote from these remarks of Dr. Yasmin Ali Haq during Ministry of Drinking Water and Sanitation UNICEF program, that was the announcement on Mahatma Gandhi ji's International Sanitation Convention on September 13, 2018. This we quote from UN.org press releases, that how today the world in terms of domestic policies as well as global governance issues is revisiting, understanding the timeless significance of the ideas of Mahatma Gandhi. Sustainable development implies that one must fulfill the needs of the present without compromising needs of the future generation. In Mahatma Gandhi ji's words, that is, there is enough in the world for needs but not for greed. No doubt economic development is important, but the question of exploitation, this aspect of man exploiting the nature, has to be corrected. What is needed is a correct balancing of the needs and usage. So today when the world is looking at issues of sustainability, sustainable development, ecology, issues of natural disaster and climate change, Mahatma Gandhi ji in his life has already given the way out and the perspectives for everyone to understand. His idea of Sarvodaya, which was akin to the idea of welfare of all, it reaffirmed trusteeship, service for all. So above all, as Mahatma Gandhi ji said, that I adhere to my doctrine of trusteeship in spite of the ridicule that it has been poured upon it. It is true that it is difficult to reach, so is non-violence difficult to attain. So today when we are looking at a world full of inequality, there is rampant change, but the world is divided between a rich bloc versus a poor bloc. An ideal of correction of economic inequality, of factoring in equity in society can be worked out by the Gandhian ideal of reaching down to the last and the least without violence. Looking at that how material and moral growth need to be balanced. And most important, his perspective that to which the world is even debating today, that is the very idea that greatest good of the greatest number. Is it useful? Is it beneficial enough to deal with the challenges that the world is facing? Today, when the world is dealing with crisis of globalization, issues of global governance, new question marks put forward on the world economic trajectory by ecological devastation, by disparity between people, by growing unemployment, the big question mark comes forward. And the big aspect that how Mahatma Gandhi's ideals of balance, how his idea of reaching down to the last and the least person is significant to work out contours of global governance based on sustainability, inclusivity, equity amongst others. So therefore, when we look at the Gandhian way and the picture of a better world, dear learners, a very significant remark that we have at this hour, that is the views of the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji at the United Nations General Assembly in New York, relevance of Mahatma Gandhi ji in the contemporary world. And we quote from the words, which indeed are very significant. The quote says, "Even those who had never met Gandhi ji were deeply influenced by his life, whether it was Martin Luther King Jr. or Nelson Mandela. Whether it's climate change or terrorism, corruption or selfishness in public life. Gandhiji's ideals are the guiding light for us when it comes to protecting humanity." So therefore, what we see here is that we all know that Mahatma Gandhiji had brought the change. But it is also very essential, once again quoting from the words, everyone knows that he had brought change, but it would also be right to say that he had awakened the inner strength of people so that they could bring the change themselves. So dear learners, as we are understanding, as we deliberated, the significance of reimagination of the Gandhian perspectives, his ideals for the global world order. Today, as we all know, that power is the central axiom in world governance. This perspective on power as based on love was given by Mahatma Gandhiji, and today how when issues of diplomacy are facing crisis, the Gandhian way indeed guides all. Security is integral to all international relations work, and this idea of security is getting changed from traditional to non-traditional dimension, and in all realms, from climate change to ecology to empowerment of all to economic avenues, in all of it Mahatma Gandhiji's ideals indeed present timeless significance of values and perspectives to build a world order that cares for humanity, to situate the contours of world governance on equity and parity for all, and above all, to build a sustained future wherein all nations can contribute together through joint efforts, collaborative action in order to secure a great advantageous position for everyone, which has the strong foundations of truth, non-violence and peace. So dear learners, we hope that the lecture on the Gandhian ideals and the world order, and understanding above all that how significant are the Gandhian ideals for contemporary global governance and issues thereof, We hope that this lecture gave you significant insights. We look forward to some positive feedback from you all. Thank you very much.